and welcome to UnitedTV. My name is Kemal Erkan. Today is January 12, 2024, and our 2 p.m. session is about to start. I'm gonna actually have my guest join me right away. Today we have our political series 2024. Our first guest is gonna be Monica Beard, and I am letting her in now. Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. It's great to be here on a beautiful day after all the rain and storms we've had recently.
Absolutely. I think we did okay with the storm, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The power stayed on, which I think a lot of people lost it. So thinking about everyone who was staying in a hotel or lost their power.
So I think we managed it okay, and I think we were expecting a little bit more than what they were telling us. Maybe at least from the Delaware standpoint, we did all right. So, Monica, you are running for the 22nd district in Delaware.
Yes,
Uh,
Hocassin and Pike Creek.
Hochesland, Pike Creek. That's a nice, very nice area, right?
Absolutely beautiful. The best in Delaware, if I say so myself.
That's a new Delaware group. So. Before we go into the topics discussions, I would like to kind of get to know you, and if you can actually maybe introduce yourself and tell people what you're about, and then we'll start the questions after that.
Absolutely. So I'm Monica Beard. I grew up in Hocassin, actually grew up in my district. I'm a graduate of Independence School and Tatnall, and for my day job, I work at the Delaware Coalition Against Domestic Violence, managing the community health worker program that we have. So, like a lot of people, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, I was really concerned about what's going on in our country. I'm the mom of a 4-year-old. And I think we are so lucky where we are to be a place where it's great to grow up. And I want to make sure that those opportunities and those options that are available to my son are available to everyone. So I'm a mom, I'm a first-time candidate, and I am really excited for everything I do in my community. I started off on rape crisis work with YWCA and now work for the coalition, and still am very involved in rape crisis work, anti-domestic violence work, all that kind of thing. So it's great to
Did you work with YWCA?
I have been volunteering for the rape crisis
Okay.
hotline for about 7 years now, and work
Okay.
very closely with them.
Okay. Yeah, we are a big support. That's a wonderful organization, and I believe their new CEO is going to be our guest sometime in February.
I'll be excited to watch. You know, they've had such a great development, and I think Melissa has done wonderful things for the organization. So I will make sure to tune in to see her on the show.
So the 2024 politics is going to be very challenging, not just for Delaware, but nationwide. Now, I know at the local level, we have maybe different focus points, but overall, economy, healthcare, education, crime, energy and climate changes, housing, infrastructure, immigration, and corporate and social justice, those are like the top 9 issues that we kind of identify. And we want people to get to know you. That's kind of at least our goal before the primaries. But before we start with the questions or the topics, do you have anyone is primary challenging you in the primaries?
I mean, you can't say for sure until the filing date in July, but I believe I will be the Democratic candidate for District 22.
All right. Now, the District 22 did change, right? I don't know how recent that was, but the area that it's covering, it used to be a little bit different. So do you know what that?
A little bit. So it used to expand more into Newark and now has moved more into Wilmington, the 19808 zip code, which used to be Representative Brady's district in the 4th, as well as taking some territory that used to be Representative Griffith's in the 12th. And I know several of the constituents very much miss Representative Griffith, but it moved a little bit northward.
I see. I see. All right. Now, I think the number one issue is going to be economy, as we all know, and this is probably affecting everyone at different levels, but it's affecting everyone. So, from your position, the position that you are going to represent, What is your view, and what do you actually see as a challenge, and what your plans are from the economic issues?
So we are very lucky in that Hockessin and Pike Creek is a more affluent area, but I think that just because it is a more affluent area doesn't mean the economy doesn't affect us. When you fill up your gas tank, when you are looking at the price of food. I know myself, when I'm buying ingredients for dinner, it costs more than it used to. And so I think it is something that a lot of people of all incomes are really worried about. So for me, when I'm thinking about the economy, it really is being thoughtful about, does our economy work for everyone? And what are the challenges that are out there? So I was very supportive of paid family and medical leave. I was very involved in the Delaware Cares because I think it is really important that when we are considering how to help people balance work and family life, I know that during COVID, a lot of working mothers exited the workplace because they just couldn't balance work and family life. So
Mhm.
when we're looking about the economy, I want to make sure that we're taking a holistic approach, particularly because in Delaware, some of the key economic things are not things that we can really affect. As much as I think some of the politicians in Delaware would love to be able to uh, influence interest rates or be able to set those, that is not something we can control. What we can control are these wraparound services. How are we making sure that people can stay in the workplace? How are we making sure that we have a transport system that works for people getting to work? How are we making sure that people can balance work and family life? So I think looking at it from that comprehensive view is really essential.
Now, you just said that you have a young son, 4-year old. Maybe you'll have more kids later on. I don't know if you guys are planning or not, but if we were to go into the education and having a young child, uh, what are the challenges for your family? And with that, what are your plans on education? Do you believe that we can do things differently in Delaware, especially our public school system has its own challenges? I'm lucky that I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about public school. But for those who do, that's a big challenge. What can you tell us on the education side?
So yes, absolutely. My son is in preschool at the moment, and since preschool is private, our preschool costs more than our mortgage at the minute. I think that is not uncommon, particularly for families that have more than one child. So as he goes into public school, he won't start until 2025. I think a lot about that I am in an area where we really love our local elementary schools. North Star, which is my local school, is so well regarded, Linden Hill, but there really seems to be that disconnect as people get into middle school and get into high school. And while obviously I don't have the personal experience as a parent, I'm really curious, why is that? Is it the size of the schools? Is it the teacher to student ratio changes? I'm really interested as well in what are we doing for, and I will say this over and over, wraparound services. I was very interested in Representative Moore's legislation, which would
Mhm.
provide free meals to students. I know from my work at the Delaware Coalition Against Domestic Violence that if a student's in a difficult home life or a traumatic situation, sometimes school is the one place where they know it's going to be safe and stable. Are we making sure that these children have enough to eat? Are we making sure that they have professionals in their lives? I am an unabashed stan for having social worker supports in schools to make sure the children who are really going through trauma and have this as their stable location has a place to do it. I'm really encouraged that we have much more understanding than we did 20 or 30 years ago, that what's happening in a student's life really influences them in the classroom. And I think about how can we encourage us as a community to come together to support students who are having a difficult time, who maybe have parents who are going through a divorce or going through trauma. I think a lot of times there has not been the sense of the community embracing and supporting them because what I have observed, albeit from a distance with a younger child, is that it's harder to build those kind of communities around schools as children get older. And I'd really love to encourage people to do more of that. Obviously, it's working with school boards, it's working with local PTAs, but I think that's really important.
I see some videos, and usually when I watch those, I try to kind of not probably trust the entire thing. So I question, I know they may not be fully real, but some of the videos are kind of disturbing, especially the violence against teachers, and how frequently that's being shared. Other than the system itself, there are also some other issues, the relationship between the students and the teachers. I think there are still a lot of challenges that not sure how the future is going to be for those individuals who are raising kids and sending their kids to school. That's why it's important for people like yourself to take ownership and run for these types of positions to see if you guys can make impacts. And hopefully you can. But it is a challenging situation.
And we
Uh,
ask teachers to do everything. We ask them to be social workers. We ask them to be psychologists. They do all that work. And so we need to make sure that there is those supports in the schools so the teachers can teach on top of making sure that a child is okay. Every
mhm.
teacher I know, if a child is in the classroom hungry or not with adequate clothes, they want to do everything they can for them. And I want to make sure we're helping them.
Right, right. All right. Now, the other thing that I should have told you this, on our Twitter account, on my personal Twitter account, I start because of the discussion that we have there, kind of the topic is same. So it's 9, 10 different topics. The ranking of those topics do change. Sometimes the economy is number one, sometimes it's not. So I started these surveys, and we keep track of them. And then we are adding more for every topic that we have. We are going to have 2, 3 different surveys, and a lot of people are participating. There are some haters, so that's you can help them. But I want to tell you, when we did the first time, like what issues are the most problematic issues, most challenging issues, that actually changed in like 3, 4 weeks time frame. It changed. So we'll keep these on our records to make sure that my idea is I want to actually repeat them maybe starting from June, and then kind of compare with the same questions where people were before and where people are now. A lot of misconception there. People think that only my followers are answering these. That's unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I don't see a lot of participation from the followers. But this is promoted. So these are promoted posts, and it's only in the United States. So they are not my followers. They don't represent my opinions. And then that's why I get a lot of hate messages from both sides, depending on how they read the questions. So, but the economy, healthcare, education, and one of them was surprising, housing. If we can talk about the housing a little bit, now, especially with the situation that we have these days with the economy and others, do you see a big challenge or big problem for Delaware in terms of the housing and affordability of housing, which you kind of mentioned that there are already issues, but specifically to the housing, are there any plans from your side or any maybe collaboration that you do with other representatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would urge anyone who hasn't read the Delaware State Housing Authority's Housing Needs Assessment to do so. The executive summary is probably 10 pages, very easy to understand, and really gives a comprehensive understanding of what is going on with Delaware. 8% of Delawareans are living in incredibly insecure housing, whether they're couch surfing or staying with friends. We have the highest amount of family homelessness there's ever been. So that means children. And so I was very eager to look at the recommendation. There is a really incredible lack of housing stock in Delaware. Affordable homes are not being built. Well, homes that a working family, people who are firefighters or nurses are doing really essential work in our community are not able to afford to live there. And so I think we should be really thoughtful about incentivizing what we're doing to build these affordable homes. How are we working with developers to really urge them not to be focused on the luxury home market or listen, we all love visiting down in Sussex at the beach, but how are we incentivizing them not to be focusing on building that, but to be focusing on workforce housing? I was really impressed with the work that Representative Larry Lambert and Newcastle County did up in Claymont to really focus on workforce housing. I think that is a wonderful development. I think being thoughtful about where it makes sense to build more workforce housing is also something. As much as I think we all want to build near Middletown, anyone who has been driving near Route 1 at any time during rush hour knows that we have to also make sure that we're keeping up with the transport infrastructure. So I think not only incentivizing the housing, but making sure that we are looking at the problems around that. What does that mean for schools? As you mentioned, if all of a sudden a bunch of new developments are built, how are we keeping up with the schools? How are we keeping up with the roads? So housing kind of touches on every issue. I think because it brings everything there, you start with it and it dominoes. But I do think that really incentivizing workforce housing is an essential piece of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the issue, usually the struggle that I have, knowing we don't really have clear answers for the near future, because the things are changing. Like COVID was, it was brand new. Like, I don't know why we had to go through it in our lifetime, but it's happening. Not everyone who live their lives in this world, they didn't have to go through everything that we did. I think that it was an extremely important experience, maybe, although it has its own issues and challenges and problems, but it changed everything. It changed the way that we kind of live today. It changed our habits. It changed our expectations. So, and with that, we can only do so much planning, I guess. And I always say that, as much as we expect things from state officials or federal officials, everyone individually have to take responsibilities to make things better. So it's just like you can be in charge of your district, but you can only do so much on your own, right? So everyone needs to have that ownership and accountability. And that's the only way only time that we are going to be able to have a better impact. Now,
And something I love about Delaware is that I can't imagine what it's like to live in a big state. In Delaware, 5 people can get together and say, this is something our community needs and really make a difference. We all have our legislators' cell phone numbers. We all know our neighbors. That's something that's really amazing about Delaware. You're right. We can really do things in community so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Pike Creek and Hocassin probably don't have this issue as much, but overall Delaware does. Crime is another big problem for Delaware. Again, you are on the luckier side of town. I live in Greenville, 2 miles or 2.5 miles from downtown. There are times that I'm worried about where I live. There are times that I'm okay. But the crime for Wilmington especially is a bigger problem than any other part of the state. But overall, do you think there are things that we can do better on the crime issues and managing those issues?
So I have been lucky enough that most of the work that I've done with the police has been with the victim services, with people who are the ones who's there holding someone's hand when there's been a murder or gets called out when you have been abused by a family member. So I will admit that I am used to dealing with people who are in that being victimized by very serious crime and the people who work with them. And I know that those things are really life-changing. Luckily, I think when we are talking about crime, we do have to distinguish the type of crime. It is really good that after COVID, homicides are reducing. I think everyone is really happy about it. I think when people are talking about crime, they're talking about more the property crime. Is that what you're referring to?
I think the issue on like the homicide is a huge problem in Wilmington. So I think per capita, we are still in the top 5 or top 6 in the nation. I know it did get better, but I don't think
Yeah, the trends go in the right direction, but it's not
we
where we
went
want
from
it to
number
be.
1 to number 5. I think it's something like that. I don't have the latest, but this was maybe a couple months ago. I know that there was a big impact on, like, in a better way, but there's still the drug trafficking and just like what's happening on the east side of Wilmington is still it's a problem. Like I go to Sunday breakfast mission. I try to go there on a regular basis, and I never feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. So even just parking your car or being at a red light is sometimes challenging. So those are the one that I was like. I think the police department probably needs more support, in my opinion, because like especially when the issue is a little bit out of control, so you are relying on them, on those individuals even more. Like the development that I live in, we pay for one of the, I think, Newcastle officers to be in our development, just because it's too close to the city. So, and I don't think that's needed if we didn't have the crime issue. So it's kind of, I always tell people like yourself who are on the show, who come to the show, I choose to be a Delawarean. So I wasn't born here, but for the last 25 years, I came here and I never left. So, and I love this state. So, and you were on something earlier, like us being a smaller state, that has advantages and disadvantages, but advantage would be we are able to reach out to not just the officials, the state officials, but also other people and then communicate better. So then we can actually do certain things better. I always, when things happens, I'm like, okay, are we managing this better than other states? Are we in the top 5? Are we in, top 7? And it doesn't happen sometime, and it just breaks my heart. And that's why I'm also personally interested in, working with our state officials closely, especially being a healthcare provider, healthcare network.
Yeah.
It's putting more responsibility on our shoulder, and hopefully, we can see better improvements. And I know John Carney is going to be the next mayor of Wilmington.
Yeah,
So
apparently he's running.
yes, it's kind of funny in a way because I asked him why he didn't run for the Senate, and he's like, "Oh, I'm kind of like done." And you can actually, I think it was Sean. He was in February, right?
February,
Yeah, last year February he was with us, and he's coming back. This time I'm going to ask him how come he didn't listen to me. So, but I think now he's instead of running for the Senate, he's running for the Wilmington mayor position, and I think he'll be the next mayor. And I know that he's able to hopefully probably do more. What we already have from the current mayor, he can probably add more to that, and then we'll be in a safer place. Now, overall, Monica, if you want to highlight your campaign, what are your main focuses?
So I would say that really, as a working mom, I'm very interested in making sure that we have supply of childcare, making sure that it's supplied, it's affordable. I know when we were going through the pre-K process, there wasn't really any support to help you navigate it. I want to make sure the parents feel comfortable navigating that. And I will bring up the dreaded summer camps. I would love to see more encouragement of summer camps and really summer childcare for children. I am also deeply interested in education. We talked about that a lot. I think it's something that a lot of parents are really concerned about, making sure that we have a school system where you feel like your children, yes, they're getting wonderful math, writing, and science skills, but also feeling like they're becoming engaged citizens and becoming really active, their civic skills and becoming part of the community. That's something I'm really interested in. And I will say, based on my background, I'm very interested in being an advocate for the most vulnerable Delawareans. I do a lot of volunteer work with people in crisis, a lot of work with people in crisis. And I think there are ways in which, as you were speaking about with crime, victims can really fall through the cracks sometimes. It can be a frustrating and confusing experience to be victimized. I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support them.
No, that's those are important. Now, again, from the one of those surveys that I'm actually running these days, one of the maybe not so surprising, because this is kind of consistent in other places, I see our current administration, the approval rate for our current for our presidents right now, it's one of the lowest. Uh, do you see that as a challenge for Delaware and him, especially being from Delaware? I would like to hear what you have to say. Like, do you think that would be a problem for people who are running for in Delaware?
You know, I would certainly hope that at the local level, there's really the sense that we can get to know each other and that we can work together in a way that it's very hard to at the federal level. I admit, even myself, sometimes I turn on the news about what's going on in federal politics and I think, oh, this again, this gridlock, this frustration. But the great thing is that there are really amazing things happening at local level. I want to spot everything from down my street. We've been able to get a red light camera that people always wanted, to everything from now that we have a minimum wage that has increased, which a lot of people were campaigning for, to paid family leave. All of these are things that people got together at the small local level. At Marbrook Elementary, over not too far on Centerville Road, a lot of parents got together and said, we want to keep a Spanish immersion program open. I love that Delaware is really an example of community coming together. And so what I have found that at the doors, people don't really want to talk about Biden or Trump. What they want to talk about is what's going on locally. They want to talk about traffic. They want to talk about speed bumps. They want to talk about schools. So I hope that we can really have a campaign where people are very interested in those substantive issues. But as we're close to the election and you can't avoid it, maybe I would be very curious how your survey changes in September when you can't get away from political news.
Yeah, I kind of like enjoy these interactive engagement that we have. Again, like I'm okay to receive some hate messages, but it's kind of funny how people are reading these things. Like that means if you set your mind in certain way, if you feel like you're like this or that, between the two, you read the same sentence, and then this person is saying that, oh, look who's running the survey. Just look at his name or look at his background and look at his profession. And the other side, I see some people who are doing the same thing from the opposition. So then it's kind of like, it's almost like a social study. So how the same statement can be processed very differently. And then I understand that this is not just about what we do, what we say, and how we do certain things, but how frequently we communicate, how much we communicate, how much we put out there, and we have to keep doing that. I think that's part of the issue, because some of them, like I'm so glad that my parents don't speak English, because I don't want them to read those messages. So, but beside that, what we have is we have really good total participation, because that means we get responses from both not just two parties, but more than that. And when you get 1,300 to 2,500, between 1,000 to 2,500 votes, then we know that we are getting good feedback. So like one of the, I'll share one of them with you regarding, we did this one for the electric vehicle, and ask people how they feel about the EV's future. And, I was expecting people on Twitter, you can only do 4 different options. So you can't put like more than 4, and then the character is limited. So you have to be really kind of play with that. So first 3 of them, they were kind of standard. And then the last one, when I put hate EV cars, I think you see it on that small screen, I actually put that just to be funny. But look what happened. So that was number 1 choice. So it's kind of like weird how what we
I'm
actually.
shocked so many people have driven an EV car to hate it. How
Right.
many people have driven one and tried it?
Right. So, and this is one of those that I was kind of having fun with, and I'm like because the other questions, other options, they're kind of like nicely written, and then this one is hate EV cars, and then that was the number 1 choice for people. I'm like, interesting. So then, but then you can kind of see like maybe slowly, some people are going to do it, some people are not going to do it. So another survey that we had, so let me see which one I want to share with you now, because there are so many of them. Like we just started latest one is the woke culture. And this is, I work with a lot of Democrats together. So, but I have my own opinion on this issue, but I want to actually kind of hear how people responded to this. Like one is like, are they even familiar with it? And the answer was we got like 580 votes, and then 85% are responsible, are aware of it, and then 8% has no idea. But then when you go to the specific answers, based on which party they represent, they take their position. So there's no like independent or kind of like balance, view on this. So we do want you to come back closer to the elections. And then at that time, it would be great if we can actually just look at these together and then side by side and see how it's changing, because it's going to be a nice study at the end of it. I'm thinking that we would have 35 to 40 questions for total surveys, and hoping that we can kind of see an interesting maybe progress. Now, having no challenger for primary, do you think that's an advantage or disadvantage?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. It's definitely an advantage in that you can be on the doors right away, talking to not only Democrats, but everyone about what you want for the district, what you think are the policy platforms. But I think maybe the disadvantage is that I think there can be a little bit of sense with people that you don't need to worry about any election that is only having a general until after the primary. And we have such a late primary in Delaware that you do want to wave your hands and say that just because there's no primary doesn't mean that we're not out there working and that I don't need your support. So pros and cons to everything, right?
True. I mean, being able to raise money is important for your campaign. And sometimes when we don't have the tension, people are not putting their hands under the rug. So, when you are on your own, they think that you are safe. She doesn't need anything. Um,
There is not a politician alive who will claim they don't need money. I think if you find me one, I will be very impressed. Bring them on the show.
Yeah. So hopefully, you'll do well. And now, who's your Republican
Mike Smith?
position? Mark?
Mike
You said
Smith.
Mike?
So it's very confusing. There are two Mike
Oh, yeah,
Smiths,
there are two,
the
right?
Republican in the 22nd, not the Democrat in the 21st. We have
Yeah.
a lot of Michaels in this side of Delaware. It's just a thing.
All right. Well, anything you would like to add before we close your part?
Just that I'm really excited with the survey you're doing. You're talking about so many topics that really affect Delawareans' lives. And I'm very curious to see that when they are kind of stuck in the closer to the election bubble and forced immersion theory, how that comes. I'm glad you're bringing up so many of these important topics that I'm excited to keep talking to you about them.
Well, we greatly appreciate you joining us. This is really important. Again, having this political series in 2023, having about 15 people. And then this year, I want to make sure that we open our channel for everyone. And then you guys can come and voice your opinion. And if we are able to support you in any way, that would be great. And thank you for joining us.
And I'm going to keep watching. I'm excited to see some more of your guests.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, Sean, you are able to join me. Many people forget that you are already in the room, right? So,
No, they can't. How do they forget me?
so,
Always do.
so how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to be back, starting off the new year. Our second guy, and we had a wellness webinar earlier in January, but I think it's their first one going back to the usual routine. Yeah, good to be here.
So, It's so interesting when we meet these individuals, especially when I never met them before.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like for me, it's a lot of it's fun. I'm having a lot of fun when we get to know people.
Mhm.
Now, not having any idea about Monica Beard and her joining and explaining what she's trying to do, I think it's kind of also surprising how sometimes like I may have one opinion versus now it's a different one. So
Sure.
I feel like she did a really good job explaining herself and what she's trying to do. Um, and hopefully she'll do well, and then we'll bring her back again. So what was your take?
Yeah, I mean, I liked to highlight one of the things she did say, which kind of stuck out to me was the part when I know you brought up how the government's doing on the federal level, and her response kind of focused on how I guess when she's out in the street or whatever, the conversations tend to be focused towards what's actually happening right here in the community. And I think that is both a good thing and a bad thing because it's good that you're focused on what's happening in the community. Obviously, there's certain issues that pertain only to you as opposed to somebody on the other side of the country, but also not to abandon that element where you realize that what happens on the ginormous, large scale federal government does impact you trickling down. So in a way, some of the decisions that are made at the top tier will impact every local community. So even though you may not be discussing it with someone maybe who lives in Wyoming, they may have a different issue right there, but in a way they are still all connected, kind of that bigger, larger branch. So interesting take on it. I know there's some pros and cons, but that did stick out to me.
All right. So we have, since the last time, we have 3 more questions. We kind of almost shared one of them. Do you want to go through those together on the woke culture?
Yes, I'll bring these back up. So the initial one that we had, let me just turn it on here.
I got a lot of
Yeah,
haters on this one.
just so everyone sees, so the initial one, the initial was whether or not they're familiar with it. So we did kind of discuss that with Monica there, saying that people are at least aware of what the term is. You may not know all the details or what specifics, but just the concept that gets behind it. There is a sense of familiarity. It looks like over 85% of people said they were at least familiar. But if we do go down through these other 2 questions here, switch. Yep.
So the question was if woke culture has had a significant impact on society in recent years. So the answers, yes, is 76%, no is 20%, and not sure is 4%. So this is one of those questions that we get a lot of feedback from different people saying that is it a good impact or bad impact? So I guess when we are not able to elaborate these questions because we are limited with what Twitter Elon Musk is giving us. So, but because I already put it as a woke culture, I'm assuming that people are taking this either, if they are Democrats, they are taking this as a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think they're affiliated.
But they just don't want to call it woke.
Right.
Is that what it is?
Probably. I mean, the fact that we're presenting it on kind of a neutral basis, where you're just saying, did it have a significant, you didn't say it benefited or, that maybe it had a downside. You didn't say either way, you just said significant. So significant could be positive or negative. Again, it's up to the viewer how they're interpreting that. So like you're saying, somebody on the Democratic side might be associating that with positivity, that there's change going forward, but somebody on the more conservative side might say, no, there's bad associations with the woke culture and how it's destroying X, Y, Z. But yeah, I think again, you're seeing kind of the breakup on the span of who these people are who are responding. It's like over almost 800 responses. So overall, whether it's a positive or negative impact, regardless on their stance perspective, it looks like a significant amount of people, not to use the word significant twice, but a significant amount of people do think that overall it is having some sort of impact that is at least meaningful enough that you're realizing or feeling some of the effects of it.
So I think with this woke culture, I guess the issue is what are the common things that we actually discuss around this topic. That's kind of like how it's kind of painting someone's opinion. So well, UPenn, Leah Thomas contributed to this a lot. Other like issues around transgender topic contribute to this a lot, right? So then it goes to a point where how much publicity these things are getting. So then already, so whatever someone wants to believe in is kind of impacted by what they read and how they read it. So clearly, like this actually got 63 people commented on this one, like other than the number of people who answered to survey, this has one of the most number of people who responded. Again, some of them are just being assholes, that's fine, but some of them are good ones. And you can see people are concerned about certain things. Now, with Monica Beard being like having a 4-year-old child, and I don't know if you catch that, but what she was saying is the school is more expensive than her mortgage.
Wow.
And now probably kid is going to a private school, right? So it's costing that much. Preschool, she said.
Preschool.
So, and if they were to go to the public school, how much of this is going to be more, like I saw this video, I think this morning or last night, this young teenager was beating the 65-year-old teacher. So
I think I know what you're talking about a little while back.
I just saw that it's like in the last 12 hours. So those are the things that are happening. And also, you know, okay, so let's see if this is going to come out right. I feel like I'm going to be in trouble, but I'm used to that. Where is it going to stop? Where is it going to stop, right? So if someone who just says, I identify this way or that way, 10 years ago, we were describing those things in one way. Now we are doing it in a different way. And we are seeing that now, you know, remember that we discussed so much of these, like accepting and celebrating and next level of the participation. What is next? Like someone who, like, you know, we are going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, and we don't have to go to his video yet. But what if he says that's how he identifies himself? He's a sex addict, and then now it used to be a disease, but not anymore.
Right.
He says this is how I identify myself. So it may be illegal, but not anymore. So it's not illegal anymore. So is that going to be the next?
Yeah.
Right? Where is it going to stop? It is important. So, and with the way that it's happening, I don't see it stopping. So, you know, if if you feel like there's enough support from that side, people are pushing it. But I can't see someone making arguments saying that, look, I don't have a mental illness. I don't have sex addiction. I am. This is how I'm identifying myself. I can see someone like Jeffrey Epstein making that point. Well, 10 years from now, is that what's going to be accepted? That's going to be the norm, because we had those issues with a lot of big officials, like people, big names with presidents and vice presidents and others. So someone who's a cocaine addict is going to be saying that, well, this is how I identify myself. Well,
yes.
So where do we stop?
Yeah, forced to accept it. But like you said earlier, not only accept it, but like celebrate it and support it. Whereas like, I think it's one thing if somebody says, oh, I identify this way or that way. It's one thing to acknowledge them and say, okay, you know, that's their right. They can do what they please. But then to be like, I guess in the media, it's like almost like rubbing it in your face. Like you have to like acknowledge it every day. It has to be like
well, I mean, we are kind of looking at it from an independent standpoint. In fact, maybe me personally, I work with Sarah McBride, like not just supporting her, I work with her.
Right.
So that means, at least to me, it clearly says that the issue is not for someone being XYZ. The issue is how this is being imposed on some others and how it's being accepted. So like everyone's choice is their own. They live their lives, and we look at them just like, okay, Sarah to me is Sarah McBride. So I don't see, oh, here's the transgender. That's not what it is.
Mhm.
And if every time I meet her, if she's pushing her transgender agenda, I wouldn't be working with her.
Right, exactly.
This is that simple. So I think this is way too much in people's lives. And I think the schools are the most worried places that I'm actually, and hopefully, people actually get their common sense together. What was our next question?
The other one we had right here was whether or not they thought it would play a role in the election itself. It seemed to be kind of mixed. It did say yes was the winner, but with the three choices, it was kind of spread pretty evenly, no clear dominant one-sided response.
Mhm.
But again, I think also depends on who is seeing the question and how they interpret it, because somebody who leans far one way may say, yes, like this needs to be, we need to be talking about these things, X, Y, Z. On the other end, somebody could say, no, I don't consider this at all when I vote. Like, it doesn't come to mind. I'm more concerned about economy or crime, whatever another element may be that's debated. So,
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to this question, Sean, the way that like 57% is saying that yes, to some extent, and not really. So that means we can tell that this 43% who says yes significantly, they're probably on the Republican side.
or again, if you're on
Or
the
the
other
other way
side,
around.
I'm saying, or you could be liberal and saying, yes, we need to be talking about these rights that are not being recognized. Or again, I think it depends on, like, you'd have to have a more specific, like, we keep the questions general, so it's
Yeah.
out to everyone,
Well,
but
and as we are doing these, well, number one, actually, I'm going to ask the same questions again after June, but as we are creating new questions in terms of the answers, we'll work a little bit more carefully to see if we can be more specific. But again, there's only 4 options that we can use, and then those options do have character limits. You can just write a whole sentence there. That was kind of the limitation that we had. So,
you have a couple other things here. As you mentioned earlier, there was as you're saying, what's being pushed on us with the media too. You're seeing now resurfacing 2 stories out with Jeffrey Epstein with the document list of the names of people who supposedly visited there. And then also in New York City, different conspiracies are now coming out of the news of the underground tunnels illegally dug underneath other buildings, causing them infrastructure concerns. By I guess the Jewish community and the synagogues is where they all originate, go back to. So not sure which one you want.
Well, let me actually just put you on the spot. If that was a mosque and then those guys were Muslims, would you not label them terrorists? Please be honest.
I mean, I think it would ring more alarm, so to speak.
Why are we not more alarmed?
Right.
Right. So this is the world that we live in. What they are doing is extremely concerning again. And the way that how media actually puts these things all together for us is like, oh, well, these are Jewish people, so it's fine. Well, no, they are radicals. And they are doing something illegal, but then they are so entitled. So when the police is trying to fix the problem, they're actually fighting against police.
Yeah, I saw the video. They were
Right.
The other resisting.
So I wonder any of them is going to try to deport them if that's the process that we want for everyone else who's in the same situation. The answer is no, because again, it's not like what type of crime. We don't hate the crime. We hate who does the crime. So it's like, the similar stuff that we did for the violence. So something very interesting with these, I think 3-4 different topics that are kind of like all together. So today there is a legal case started in the international court, filed by South Africa,
yeah.
and then this is against Israel. So more than 85% of Gaza today, 2.3 million people have been displaced in the last 3 months. So this is this is the same people who were dealing with the Israeli blockade since 2007. So now, after everything else happened, finally, South Africa said, okay, well, this is not going to be okay. So we are filing this case. And then this is supported by several different countries. This is the, if it's a binding court. So like how it's going to be binding, I don't know. I don't have the details, but it's binding. And United Nations Security Council can actually enforce this. The problem is Security Council is 5 countries, right? China, US, France, Russia, and the UK. So if US is supporting this, they cannot actually do much. But I think it's giving a good, strong message out there. Now, what's shocking, which I just learned that this morning, which we kind of talked about, Jeffrey Epstein, who's representing Israel.
That same lawyer who defended him during his case.
So Alan Dershowitz is the guy who was in the who was representing Jeffrey Epstein, and not only he was representing him, but he was one of the people that who was accused by one of those victims, saying that she was raped 6 times by him. But the same guy is representing Israel today. So Jeffrey Epstein and Israel are being represented by same lawyer who allegedly raped the same lady 6 times in the Jeffrey Epstein case. I mean, I'm just kind of shocked when I see these kind of like, are these just coincidence, or are these things that already kind of well planned? Was Jeffrey Epstein, was he part of this big game that, just like everyone else was saying about him being a Mossad agent, and the things that they are actually they have against some of our really well-known people, including some of our presidents and other people. Now, question I have for you, maybe you have a different view on this. This Epstein documentary on Netflix was aired in 2022. It was right after he died, actually. So, and that's a 4 episodes, very detailed. It's giving you all the names that we are discussing today, but it's also giving you more details than anything that you need. So what's different now that, like, why are they making big, big news about it? Like, we already know what it is. Like, nothing is happening with those names. Like, also there's no other more details about the names. Why do you think that they're just keep bringing this up?
I mean, supposedly it was that there was, I guess, additional names. There was a full list or whatever, but maybe weren't mentioned initially. But like you're saying, what is the purpose of having this resurface in the news now? You know, a couple of years later, a few years later. I'm not sure entirely what the plan is. Like, who? Again, we always say, what's the media pushing? Why do they want? Sometimes is it a distraction for something else, or is it because they want you just to be focused, obsessed on this more? I think it's also interesting to look at some of the main events, like we talked about like the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, where it was like, I guess gossip to say, like, are you following the trial? Like, they keep you almost like, oh, pick this side or that side. Like, are you Team John? You
want to start a gossip channel?
Yeah, right. It's like those types of news stories seem to be like what's pushed and repetitive, where it's like gossipy, controversial. You'll get, everyone must have an opinion on this, and you want to know what's next. But yeah, like, as far as the timeline, releasing it now, what's changed, like you're saying, who knows? Also interesting how if they had that list of people for so long, why was only his wife?
But the thing is, like, why are they not saying this is what we find out about this person? Like, it's like being in one place with someone doesn't mean that they participate in that other person's crime.
No.
So, I mean, if that's the case, I've been in so many different places. I don't know. Like I told you, one of them was in DC. We were at a obesity conference. And one of the drug companies took us to this dinner at this guy's house. Apparently, Obama actually stayed in his house in the beginning of his presidency. So he was a very well-connected name. And then I saw his name with some allegations like 2-3 months later. And I was there. We had dinner. There were 25 other people from healthcare. And no one knew what was happening, who he was. So just because I was there and then I was in his residence doesn't mean that I know everything that that person was doing. So if that's the case, then I think people stop talking about it. If it's not the case, then people have more evidence. Then show us what it is. Like I put a little bit. I put time on this one a little bit to kind of make sure that we are fairly judging situations. Bill Clinton, when he got in trouble with Monica Lewinsky, it wasn't just hearsay. There was a blue dress, and it was his sperm on that dress that kind of made it very clear that he had sex with her. But if it was just like her saying that I did this with him, and there's no evidence, how can we believe that? Show us what you have, and if you don't have it, then stop, making these news. I think that's what I would like to put out there for people. And I know our Bariatric Friday event is coming up in a couple of minutes. Dr. Erkan is going to join us. We'll have.
So we have the bariatric surgery types for the Bariatric Friday next, and then coming up we have Dr. Michael Katz running for U.S. Senate. We also have Lisa Vaughn Rochester, so to be confirmed. We have Danielle Hall, Republican running for Congress, I believe, and then also we mentioned CEO Melissa, CEO of the YWCA, to join in February with John Carney also.
All right. Well, thank you for again joining us, and then we'll be back with the Bariatric Friday event. And until then, stay safe.